ladies and gentlemen, we are back here on the Sports Talk Nation. Michael Cohen here with you, and yes, this is it. This is our post-mortem, a Mets post-mortem after their season goes down in total flames, as the Mets will miss the 2025 postseason. One of the worst collapses in franchise history, and maybe even in baseball, when you consider this simple fact. Take a look at this. This, of course, posted by The Athletic. The New York Mets, second in payroll, $340 million in payroll, and they missed the playoffs. The only team with more money, a higher payroll, this year was the LA Dodgers, who are, of course, back in the postseason trying to defend their World Series championship. And in fact, if you take a look at the top 6 teams in payroll, 5 of the 6 have made the playoffs, and the one team that didn't is the team that resides in Queens, and that's the New York Mets, as their season goes down in total flames. I have said before that this meltdown, disaster of a season certainly isn't as bad nor as shocking as, let's say, 2007, when the Mets had a 7-game lead with 17 to play. I have said that before, because we could see this coming for months. From the middle of June onwards, June 13th, this team was 45-24. They had the best record in baseball. They had Juan Soto starting to turn on. Pete Alonso was hitting very well. Remember at that time, Francisco Lindor was hitting well. Everything was going well for the Mets at that time. They were the best team in baseball. But from that point onward, for the rest of this year, it has been like someone taking air. You have a full balloon. You take air out of that balloon for the next 3.5 months, as the Mets went 38-55, one of the worst records in baseball in that span ever since that point. So why should we sit here and be surprised that this team misses the postseason? They didn't deserve to be in the playoffs this year. That's how bad things were here coming down the stretch. And there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions to answer for the way things went down this year. There's a lot of people who are going to be held responsible for the way that things went down this year. I know people want to blame the manager, and certainly you can blame the manager for the way he managed the pitching staff in-game, bullpen in-game. I mean, here we are, last game of the season, a game the Mets have to have against the Miami Marlins, and that team looked like they weren't ready to play. They get shut out by the Marlins in this game, only managed 5 hits in the entire contest. You want to talk about the bullpen strategy, of course, bringing Edwin Diaz into the game in, what was it, the 4th inning? Ridiculous. Sean Manaea only going 1 2/3 innings last night? Ridiculous. You can blame the manager for all those kind of decisions. But a lot of the problems for this 2025 team started almost a year ago. Last offseason. And that is the fault of both David Stearns and Steve Cohen. They are the ones who have to take the brunt of the responsibility for what went on this year with the New York Mets, because a lot of the moves they made, and a lot of the moves David Stearns made, did not pan out. Whether it be letting clubhouse leaders like Jose Iglesias and Harrison Bader go, replacing them with guys like Nick Madrigal, who never got out of spring training with an injury, whether it be Jose Siri, who didn't do anything when he was healthy. Then you take a look at the midseason moves at the trade deadline. Obviously, Hellesley didn't work out at all from St. Louis. It was a complete bust out of that bullpen. Cedric Mullins, total bust coming from Baltimore. And look, a lot of people liked those moves when they were made. Even I thought they were shrewd moves when they were made. But they didn't pan out. And when you have moves that don't pan out, whether it be in the offseason or in season at the trade deadline, the general manager, or in this case, the president of baseball operations, is going to take the blame. This Mets team didn't have the chemistry it did a year ago. And you know what made last year, the 2024 Mets so special is this. It isn't just grimace. It isn't just all the fun and the OMG song and all that stuff that went on last year, all that song and dance stuff. It was the fact that this team had great chemistry from really middle of the year last year all the way to the end. They were fun to watch night in, night out, and yet guys pulling for each other, picking one another up. You didn't have that this year. It was missing. It was gone. And whether it's because the Mets made moves that, whether it's, not bringing back certain players or whatever it may have been, something was missing from this team from the very start of this season. Some people are going to blame Juan Soto. Hey, look, $765 million contract over 15 years. And I'll get into Soto and the contracts and all that in just a moment. Certainly, it was a year where he really never got, I thought, fully adjusted here. Now, he did hit 43 home runs, but remember the reports early in the year that he wasn't feeling too comfortable, and I never really felt that Juan Soto ever really felt comfortable here in New York. And again, yesterday, 0 for 3 in a big game the Mets have to have. He just didn't have it. And there's been a lot of situations this year where he's had multiple guys on base, big spots, and hasn't produced. In fact, he's only had 1 home run this year of a 3-run or more variety. 1, that's it. In fact, the Mets, as a team, 0-67 when trailing after 8 innings. 0-67. Yes, teams can and have and will come back in the after the 8th inning, in the 9th inning, and extra innings and find ways to win. This Mets team never did. Never. So you can pin the blame on just about anybody. You can start with David Stearns, as I just said, because of the moves that may or may not have been made to get this team over the top, not to mention the fact that he did a terrible job, David Stearns, of putting together this pitching staff for the second straight year, decided to take the gamble of bringing in basically a patchwork pitching staff of guys who were journeymen, guys who were trying to revive their careers, and it didn't work out. Griffin Canning, of course, got hurt. Frankie Montas, even before he got injured, was terrible. Sean Manaea, who a lot of Met fans, including myself, wanted to see come back, 3-year, $25 million deal, after he just wasn't the same after getting injured in spring training. Kodai Senga wasn't the same after another injury this year. Got sent down to the minor leagues. Clay Holmes, okay, had won 12 games, pitched fairly well, but let's be honest, I think considering that the Mets are paying him $13 million a year to be a 4th starter is a lot. That's a lot. To be a 3 or 4 starter is a lot. With Clay Holmes, to me, he's better off in the bullpen. So you consider those moves. The moves in the bullpen, as I just mentioned before, Helsley didn't work. Telsley didn't work out at all. Ryan Stanek, complete bust. Everybody in that bullpen. You can go up and down that bullpen of guys who didn't work out. Oscar Brazoban completely imploded the second half of this year. It's just amazing how bad this Mets team was. That's why I have a hard time sitting here and I read tweets and social media posts about fans. Oh, let's go blame the manager. What did he have to work with in a lot of times this year, especially out of the pitching staff? It wasn't much of anything. And then, of course, the Mets, as we got towards the end of the season, rushed up their 3 kids with McClain and Tong and Brand Sprout. And we're hoping, against hope, that those 3 guys would find a way to get this team to the postseason. And it didn't work out, fell short. Outside of McClain, there wasn't a lot going on there with that starting rotation. And right now, the Mets have to do a number of things to fix this team. First of all is this. The number one thing they have to address is this. What went wrong with this team? Where did this chemistry fall apart this year? And which guys can stay and which guys can go? Because if the Mets are going to go out there and just put a Band-Aid over this and bring guys back, re-sign Alonso to a big contract, $30 million a year, and renegotiate Edwin Diaz's contract. He has an option year, and basically just run it back with this group. I don't think you can do that. You can't do that at all. This core, this team has to be torn apart. And that's easier said than done because you have 2 players who are under contract moving forward long term in Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto, both of whom are going to be here for the duration. Juan Soto, of course, has a 15-year contract. He doesn't have an opt-out until 2029. Francisco Lindor is going to be here for, let's see, how many seasons does he have left in his contract? through 2031. And these guys are making a lot of money. I mean, you got Lindor making $32 million next year. You got Soto making north of $50 million next year. That's more than $86 million wrapped up in two players. And now just talk about, what are you going to do with Alonso? You're going to give him $30 million a year plus for the next 6 years? I just find that hard to believe. As much as I like Pete Alonso, I think he's a great player and is a valuable piece to this team, an all-time Met. It might be time to part ways with him. Unless the Mets can find a way to make it work and still put together a good team around these guys, it's going to be hard to figure out. So that's why I look at those contracts and go, oh, man. Oh, man. Now you start to see why long-term contracts why a lot of people just kind of roll their eyes at long-term contracts, because it just puts a team behind the eight ball, especially when you have a season like this where it's clearly obvious that it needs to be blown apart, and you can't do it. You really can't do much. Let's just say the Mets part ways with Alonso and find a way to trade Brandon Nimmo, part ways with Starling Marte, part ways with Edwin Diaz, part ways with Jeff McNeil. You're still going to have Soto here. You're still going to have Lindor here, and guys like Manaya and Holmes who are still in the contract for the long term. You're going to build around those guys? Are you going to convince a Lindor and Soto, both of whom are north of 30, that we're going to have a rebuild? That's going to be tough to convince those guys. And I feel the Mets need to, and I think a lot of people feel that the Mets need to turn the page and get younger. Hey, the Mets have supposedly the number one minor league system in baseball, right? They've won titles at Double-A, won a title, I believe, at Single-A, I believe in Brooklyn. They got a lot of guys coming up through the system. Tomorrow is coming, as far as the future of this franchise is concerned. And if they are going to turn the page from this mess in 2025 and really clean this image, they would have to just blow this team up. They really would. But I don't know if they're going to be able to do that with these contracts that they have here. It's going to be fascinating to see what they're going to be able to do. Now, you could change coaches. You can certainly talk about the hitting coaches. You could talk about pitching coaches, Eric Chavez, Jeremy Hefner, Jeremy Barnes. You could talk about all those guys, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of changes to the coaching staff this offseason. That's fine. You could talk about moving certain guys here and there. That's fine. But the fact is this. Mets made a lot of bad moves this past year that put them behind the eight ball, and they never improved this pitching staff when they needed to. They need to find an ace. I don't know where they're going to find that, whether they find it on the trade market, whether maybe a Paul Skeens becomes available from Pittsburgh. I don't know if they're going to make that happen, considering he's got arbitration years coming up in Pittsburgh. But they need to find somebody to frontline this staff outside of a Noah McLean. They need that badly. So I know I'm kind of skipping around here, bouncing back and forth. I mentioned Alonso just a moment ago, but let me say this about Alonso. When he hit that line drive to left field in the fifth inning with the bases loaded, I thought initially off the bat, it's probably going to be a double. Just hung up in the air, and then, of course, was caught. And you sort of look on his face, this dejected look on Pete Alonso's face as he and Francisco Lindor just kind of shook their heads as they walked back to the dugout. And you knew at that point this season was over. This team was over. It didn't matter what was happening in Milwaukee. It didn't matter at all that the Milwaukee Brewers would end up beating the Cincinnati Reds. Didn't matter. This team was finished. And Alonso's been a great player here. As I just mentioned, I think it might be time for both sides to part ways. I hate to say it. I would love to see the Mets keep Pete Alonso here long term, let him see him finish his career with the Mets. But if this team is going to get younger, if this team is going to get better long term, it may not be with Pete Alonso on this team, especially when you have $85 million wrapped up in two other guys. Think about that for a second. Can you imagine having $110 million of your budget wrapped up in 3 players. That's almost more than a third of your budget wrapped up in 3 guys. That's what we're talking about. Edwin Diaz, another player who's been a fabulous player here for this Mets team over the years, turned his career around in 2022. He's got a player option. I would imagine he's probably going to opt out, right? I can't imagine he's going to want to, come back at, $15 million a year next year at age 32. What do the Mets do there? Do they renegotiate that, bring him back? I mean, I would love to see it. I like Edwin Diaz, but at the same time, there's going to be other people who are going to be very interested in getting him aboard their ball club and paying a lot of money, upwards of $20 million, I would imagine, for a guy who's been a top-flight closer over the last 3 or 4 years, with the exception of the year where he was out for the entire season. Brandon Nimmo, another player who's been very good for this team over the years. Very good, but this year, kind of hit a wall. He's right now 32. He's making $20 million a year. What do you do with him? Nimmo this year only hit .262, 25 home runs, 92 RBIs. He had good numbers, but there was a point this year where he was hitting around 200, hitting around the interstate. He was having a hard time earlier this year. But again, he'll be 33 next year. What do you do with him? Do you try to move him in a deal? Jeff McNeil, I believe he's got another year left on his contract. He's another one that, if you were the Mets, what do you do? Do you move him? He's got a club option in 2027. He's under contract next year at the $15.7 million is Jeff McNeil. Do you move him in the offseason if you can? And try to make room for some of these younger guys. And then the Mets have to decide, what do you do with guys like Brett Beatty? What do you do with guys like Mark Vientos? And look, let me just say this. Both of those players really came on strong, especially towards the second half of the year. But do I think that Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos, have they shown me enough to tell me that they're going to be big-time star players that are going to lift the Mets to new heights? Right now, from what I've seen over the last couple of years, the answer is no. And I haven't seen a heck of a lot from the likes of Luis Angel Acuna and even Ronnie Mauricio, who's been bouncing back and forth and up and down in the minor leagues and major leagues. They got a lot of work to do. And the seat has to be sizzling for David Stearns. And yes, even Carlos Mendoza as well. Because another season where the Mets underachieve, don't make the playoffs. And the Mets could be looking again to reshape things as far as front office and the manager seat's concerned. And, maybe remember another thing about this. This goes also to Steve Cohen and as well. Remember when Cohen bought into the Mets and they had like a whole bunch of different general managers after Brody Van Wagenen that did not work out. I believe what it was for various different reasons. And then eventually they had to settle on sticking with Billy Epler for a while. And Cohen was looking for the president of baseball operations once he found that guy. And then the plan was that they were going to have both. Once they found David Stearns and got him away from Milwaukee, they were going to have both Stearns and Billy Epler together in that front office. And then, of course, Epler had some allegations against him. Then he had to resign. And they haven't really filled that general manager spot since. And you've had Stearns filling both the president of baseball ops and general manager spots together. Maybe it's time to get him a GM. Maybe it's time to actually announce or promote somebody who's going to be the GM and work underneath or in circus with David Stearns, because it feels like another voice is needed here, another opinion is needed here in the way the Mets operate, in the way they pick players and sign guys. I'm disgusted after what's going on transpired this season with the New York Mets. I can't sit here and tell you I'm surprised. I can't sit here and tell you that I'm surprised the way things have gone this year, because we have seen this for 3 months. 6-game losing streaks, 7-game losing streaks, getting swept by San Diego on the road in San Diego, getting swept by Cleveland at home. getting beat up by Atlanta all season while Atlanta was having a terrible season this year. Losing 2 out of 3 to Washington in the last home series of the year, where you have Jacob Young going full Willie Mays in the outfield, having a ball bounce out of his glove and kicking the ball up in the air with his foot and then finding a way to make the catch. Basically, Cirque du Soleil. The signs were there all year, folks. All year. So to sit here now and say, oh, I'm shocked. I can't believe we didn't make the playoffs. How could you not be shocked? This team was in first place. This team had a chance to win its division, and they spit the bit. And they ended up 13 back of Philadelphia, who ran away with this division, and they end up losing to the Reds, who, because of a tiebreaker, and this is why I always say, every series matters. Every series matters. They got a lot of work to do. They got a lot of work to do to the Mets this offseason. As for the Yankees, hey, look, I'll give the Yankees a lot of credit. You know what? I'll give them a lot of credit because they went toe-to-toe with Toronto for the entire weekend. You could easily, because you clinch a playoff spot and you know that you, in a tie-break situation, you lose the division because Toronto won more games head-to-head. You could have just said, okay, fine, you know what? We'll just take our lumps and go into the wild card round. Nope. Yankees did everything they could to try to win that division, hoping that Toronto would blink, but they did not. Neither team blinked at all, as Toronto swept Tampa and the Yankees swept Baltimore. So that sets up the wild card round where the Yankees take on the Red Sox. It should be a fascinating series. Yankees are red hot. I mean, they've won 25 of their last 33 coming down the stretch. They've won 8 in a row. You have Aaron Judge, who has been really on an incredible tear here in the last month of the season. Trent Grisham has been incredible in the clutch. Ben Rice has been incredible in clutch. They're basically the anti-Mets because they've had this was a season that not that long ago we were having the same conversation about the Yankees that we were about the Mets, wondering, are they going to make the playoffs? Because you had Judge injured, you had Anthony Volpe throwing the ball all over the place. You have people questioning Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone and their temperature on the hot seat, if you will. And they just turned things around in mid to late August. And they just have been on an incredible roll ever since. And outside of Seattle, they're a team that nobody wants to see coming in here in the playoffs right now. They are that hot right now. And look, I understand Boston won their season series. I know Garrett Crochet, who is going to pitch in Game 1 of this wild card series, has owned the Yankees in the regular season this year, but I can't go against the Yankees in this wild card series against Boston. That should be fascinating to see. And, hey, look, then they'll get a chance, if the Yankees do win, against Toronto in the ALDS, if that comes to pass. So they're in the postseason, and that should be a very intriguing postseason because it's wide open this year. And that's another thing about the Mets, folks. This postseason was wide open. There is no one team that is a sure lock to win a World Series this year. I can make a case for all 12 teams. I can make, well, maybe except for the Reds, but still, you can make a case for them too. I can make a case for the Yankees. I can make a case for the Red Sox. I can make a case for Seattle. I can make a case for the Padres, the Cubs, the Dodgers to go back-to-back, the Phillies. Make a case for everybody. And the Mets missed out on that chance. If they only tightened things up when they needed to, and if they only found a way to bottle up some of that chemistry and find a way to get this thing back in the right direction, they could have been part of this, but they just never did. Last year was a special year, 2024. Nobody thought that was coming anywhere. It came out of nowhere. Nobody thought that Met team was going to go to the NLCS in June of last year. Nobody thought that was even possible. And then it happened. And all the magic that was surrounding that entire year happened. And we all ate it up and we loved it. But that was a miracle season. Like and subscribe. We'll talk to you next time.